Janelle, thank you so much for joining. I was actually wondering if you can just quickly introduce yourself, give us a brief overview of just some of the amazing things that you guys are doing over at York at the moment.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me too, Matt. So I'm Janelle Gorman. I am CFO at York.ie, which is an investment and advisory firm for tech companies, high growth tech companies. My background is a CPA background. So I started fresh out of college in public accounting. Not quite sure what I wanted to do, but knowing I loved kind of the language of accounting and business from a finance perspective.
Mm.
Um, I got to a startup kind of by luck a few years into public accounting. I got a job at a company called Dynamic Network Services, which was a super high growth, really exciting journey where I met a lot of the people I work with now at York.ie. And that grew to be huge, international, super high growth company, and was acquired by Oracle about 6 years after I had joined. So learned a ton there and really got my aptitude and passion for startups and high growth, as did a few of the folks that founded York.ie. So, what York.ie does, as I mentioned, is investment and advisory for early stage and high growth tech companies. On the investment side, we've deployed over $50 million, about 10 to 15 million per year. We have a rolling evergreen syndicate model currently. So we've been deploying capital since 2019 on a steady basis, which isn't really necessarily true for all VCs. So we're lucky to have that unique approach. And we really are investing in early stage B2B tech startups. That's our thesis for the investment check. But what also makes us unique is that we have a really great advisory services practice, and not just advice, but actually doing the work in the realm of go-to-market. So marketing, revenue operations, website and digital, PR, all those things. And then our largest one is product development. So we actually have a team of 155, maybe 160. They were hiring all the time out in India. They're
Right.
representing a lot of different areas. The largest group in that office is product development. So we're doing software engineering, building products and MVPs, or mobile apps, or feature development, and really providing a great service, not only to our portfolio companies, but to all sorts of companies that just hire us to do this work to really move them forward on their product roadmap. And then the last kind of advisory area that we do is in finance and corporate strategy, which is the practice that I lead. So I'm a biased favorite for that one,
Of course, naturally.
right? But we're doing financial forecasting, fundraising preparation, due diligence support, board reporting, KPI measurements, all that sorts of stuff. So the investment practice is super exciting, but the advisory side of the business is super complementary to what we're doing on the investment side, really just helping high growth tech companies at all stages get where they need to be and really get after the growth that they're looking to see.
So similar to what you said earlier, a lot of your competition will just be giving the advice, maybe sitting back. You guys get directly involved, very hands-on for the customers.
That's right. Yeah. And so not all of our portfolio companies necessarily want that additional help, and that's
Mm,
okay. We treat them separately, so you don't have to take that additional
mm,
help. Um, But we find for the most part, when people are when entrepreneurs are looking for investors, it's really a partnership, right? Like, who gets this? Who am I going to allow on my cap table to be having a stake in this business and this dream of theirs over the long term? And the folks that we work with really see it as an added benefit for, you're not just going to have a quarterly check-in call and kind of be like sharing your report card or go to the principal's office. It might feel like with investors, but we're really kind of like in the mix with you. We're getting our hands dirty and really helping folks to build it. It's also kind of nice from our investor perspective. So we have about 70 investment partners that invest their money with us into these startups through our fund. And they really like it because it's a bit of de-risking the investment. We're not just saying like, yeah, a lot of startups fail, and so wish us luck that we get the unicorn
mm,
and get your returns to you. But we're saying we're going to really carefully choose who we're investing in, the founders that we're investing in, And then we're also going to roll up our sleeves and help them really make sure that that the business is successful. And because a lot of us have that experience from that company I mentioned earlier, Dine, where we learned a lot of things the hard way, we can help them kind of see around the corner and try to get things right the first time without making some early mistakes that we see often.
100%. I mean, just on what you said there, to kind of get straight into it, like the days of every company being able to go and get VC funding that we went and saw, 3, 4 years ago, it's kind of over, which leaves a lot of startups these days kind of using their own capital, maybe bootstrapping the business to get the job done. Where does that leave you guys as CFOs? How does that affect your role when you're working with fast growth startups?
Yeah, I think similar to most roles, the stakes are higher, right? And so as a CFO, your job is to really be able to drive the company with clarity to get toward its strategic goals while balancing resources, right? So getting the most out of the resources that you have, providing information and insight to the business partners that you're working with, the CTO, the CEO, and helping the business navigate. Now in an environment where there's just less buffer, there's less flex room, right? You don't have that
Mm,
kind of like, oh, if this doesn't go well, that's probably okay. We've got room, we've got time, we've got capital, we can always fundraise more. That's all kind of gone away. And so not just for the CFO, but for everyone in their seat, you're trying to navigate what already was a difficult balance act. And it's just gotten even sharper and even narrower, right? Your
mm,
timeline for your capital runway is probably shorter. Your requirement for results is going to be a lot higher. So any dollar that you invest, sure, we've always, had a mind for ROI, but now it's like, no, you need to know what the ROI is on that. You need to fail fast, iterate, learn, and apply what you've learned to get it right the next time, because we have fewer at bats now in
mm.
startups in this environment. One of the one of the things I talk to a lot of startups about is KPIs. So there was a KPI, the rule of 40. I don't know if you've heard of this,
I
but
haven't actually. Mm,
so the rule of 40 says you take your net income percent as a percent of revenue and you take your percentage growth. And as long as the combination of those two equal 40, you're good to go. So if you're at a net loss of 10%, so long as your growth rate is 50%, you've got your 40 and you can march
mm.
on. That started to get a bit extreme where folks would say, okay, well, my net income could be negative 100% as long as my growth is 140%.
Right, yeah, it gets a little bit skewed, but yeah.
Yeah, so that started to perpetuate what we saw in like 2021, that growth at all costs of I can do whatever I need to, burn as much cash as I need to, get as much of a net loss as I need to, so long as my growth is high enough, I can
Mm,
make up for it. I can raise again. I can just extend my capital through another fundraise and a higher and higher valuation based on that growth. That really kind of all shattered, like you were saying, with that market change where checks suddenly are not so easy to come by. So there's been a huge focus on pragmatic growth, where now the rule of 40 assumes that net income is just as desirable as growth. They're a one for one. And
mm,
that's not the case anymore. That path to profitability is heavier weighted. We still, though, don't want to say, well, no growth is fine, right? We're not going to be a culture of lifestyle businesses. And so navigating that where you have to be showing growth, but you also have to be showing a path to profitability has made the CFO's job very difficult. Um, we also, you can't just sit on money, right? To say, like, I don't know when we'll get another check, so let's just not spend money and kind of hunker down and wait it out.
mm.
You completely eliminate that growth. And then even when funds do start flowing, they're not coming your way because you haven't demonstrated growth.
Right.
Um, so just that balance has become incredibly hard. And so CFOs have to be strategic and very tactical and make hard decisions and make them swiftly, I think more than ever before.
I mean, it's pros and cons. You obviously are way more experienced than I, of course, but I would say not having that cash reserve there kind of gives the startups a little bit of a push that, right, we have to make this work. We don't have the luxury of sitting on 3 years worth of cash to burn through, so all members of the team are then just looking for the answers there and then maybe can do things a bit quicker.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
And you only have so many at bats, so you've got to get it mostly right. You can't
Mm,
just completely face plant and go raise another round and try something else. So that iteration of try, learn, adjust, try, learn, adjust, try, learn, adjust has to be pretty quick. But and you've got to get it right faster than maybe you would have in the past because you just have fewer cycles to get through.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any other kind of potential stumbling blocks that you've seen arise in a fast growing company? So as a CFO, are there things that you can point out to CEOs to kind of avoid early? What are we looking out for? What kind of things need to be prioritized to get it right the first time?
Yeah, I think prioritization is going to be critical. So I like to have folks back up first and say, what is your strategic goal for the next 3 years? What do you need to do in the next year to get there? And then they're going to name 10 things or more, right, that they could do. And I'll say, okay, you can only do three, four, five of those, maybe. Pick which ones you're going to do, especially for startups where it's there's so many ideas, right? You have your product, you're like, I need to invest in the product for more features. I need to invest in go to market to get more clients. I need to invest in my back office to make sure I can like keep the runway going and keep the business afloat. I need to hire people. I need, there's a
Mm,
million things you could do. So ruthless prioritization, starting at the top with like, what is the one thing we need to accomplish? And then what are the three things that we need to accomplish to get to that? And then you have to actually let things go and say no to things that you might actually love to do, or they're a great opportunity. I heard someone say opportunities should be a dime a dozen for early stage. And so you can't do something just because the opportunity arose. Oh, shiny object, and you go for it.
yeah.
That's really a luxury that you don't have. So ruthless prioritization, and knowing what aligns to your core mission, you have to have that clarity because things will pop up that you'll want to do and they'll just be a distraction and you won't have the resources to do them. So making those hard choices to say, no, we're not going to go in that direction, even though it feels like it could be really great. That's something that all the leadership team really needs to be super mindful of. Tackling only really what they can win, what they know with certainty and clarity will drive them toward their goal.
Mm.
Not to say you can never do the other opportunities, but you've got to kind of set them aside and say, not right now, not when my next goal is to get to here or there.
Right, I see. And obviously, as a CFO, you need to kind of be there on the shoulder of some of these companies because some CEOs and those in charge may decide to go and, like you said, choose everything, do everything at once, everything that comes our way. But it's for you to then put them back on track to just keep that
Yeah,
straight line and just focus on what you can prioritize on, basically.
yeah, you got it.
Uh,
And
uh,
and sometimes undoing decisions that you've made can be really hard. But you've got to do it. And so as a CFO, it's easier. Maybe this is why I like numbers so much and I like CFO. I can count on the numbers to tell me what to do that help me parse through some decisions that I would otherwise make that I know are emotional.
right.
And that's not to say to like do all of your leadership without emotion. Certainly that's not the case.
Of course.
The what the numbers tell you to do you might actually choose, no, I'm not going to do this thing. I know quantitatively it makes, choice A is right, but for all these other reasons, I'm going to make choice B. And you can do that kind of with your eyes open about that. But we see a lot of companies doing layoffs. We see companies closing offices. We see companies, dropping maybe a product line, or they were developing three things at once. They said, we can't develop that any further, even though
Mm,
they're interested in it, that would want to buy it. Can't do it. We've got to focus on the two we have. So putting the brakes on some initiatives that are already underway is really, really hard emotionally for founders and leaders. And it's easier said than done, but you've just got to make hard choices because the swifter you can make them and the more clarity you can have in making those choices, the better you'll preserve your business and also help morale when a tough decision has to be made. Clarity and execution in those things are really key to making sure you kind of have damage control.
mm. I mean, obviously, like, just on what you said, we've seen, just thinking out loud, we've seen company like Apple. Okay, sure, they're a huge company, but with all of the products that they have, they're now looking at reducing their Apple TV side of things. They're not producing any shows anymore, and they put so much investment into it. But like you said, you have to realize when to drop these things and when to stay on track before it gets out of control.
Yeah, there's the economic concept of a sunk cost, and that can't be considered in your decision on what to do moving forward.
Mm.
So some would say, how could we drop that? We've spent, 18 months of my life and $1 million on trying to go after that. But that time and money can't be considered in your go forward. On a
Mm.
go forward basis, what are your costs and opportunities? That's what you've got to decide. And that emotional tie to, oh my gosh, we've worked so hard for this. How can we let it go? That's a sunk cost. You got to make those hard choices.
Yeah, especially for the employees as well that have so much emotion into these projects. They put their heart and soul into it, but at the end of the day, these choices have to, of course, be made. I've got a bit of a personal question, so you can feel free to invoice me after this for your time. But at Managed Markets, we've got a new startup basically. I'm the CEO of I guess a financial services company, but I guess still in that tech space. What advice would you give to me as a CEO for someone in their first year of business? Are there any tips, any common grounds where people stumble upon? What kind of advice could you give a CEO in their first year?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of the same of what we just talked about. I would start qualitatively and say, what are you trying to achieve in the next 3 years? What are three things that you need to do to get toward in the next year to get toward that goal? Just pick three.
Mhm.
And then based on those three items, plan strategic initiatives around those three items so that you know of all the choices that are coming your way. Now you have a philosophy and you have conviction of how you're going to go about your next 12 months in order to get where you want to be 36 months from now.
Mm.
And that way, when things come in, you can test it against this, right? Let's say somebody you used to work with suddenly frees up and they're like, hey, I want to go get in on this with you. I would love to work with you. You know, they're a great talent, they're whatever, but they're actually a HR professional. And you're like, oh, I want to work with you. I would love to do this with you, but I don't need your skill set just yet.
Right.
Right. You can start to use that, like, here's my clarity, my written plan. Does this decision to hire a friend or valued colleague align to this? If it does, great, you have an opportunity that fits. But if it doesn't, that's an opportunity you have to say no to, however tempting that may be.
Yeah, true.
So getting that kind of set up early will help you to have a kind of a philosophy to fall back to help you make those decisions, especially where your leadership team is really small. So you can't bounce ideas around from a bunch of people. Getting things in writing can help you stay true to what you were originally set out to do.
That's it. Well, I'm going to make notes of all of that, and I think some of the things you've just said have already happened to me in the last 3 months alone. So, yeah, definitely going to take some notes upon some of your wisdom there.
Awesome.
Um, a quick one actually. So, obviously, we spoke about how the industry is changing. There's obviously been a bit of a lack of funding, but ultimately, from when I speak to other CFOs and professionals, every year the workload just seems to increase, especially on the CFO front. Now doing a bit of HR, now doing some, a lot of interviews, now doing a lot of hiring process. The once was role of a CFO just doing finance is now being broad.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice can you give to other CFOs that, to kind of help you deal with the extra workload, something that maybe the books didn't teach you, if you could?
Yeah, sure. I think the evolution of HR reporting into finance is an interesting one. And I actually just read an article that said that revenue operations should report into finance. And I think the trend is largely, well, one, a function of we just have to because we can't afford to hire as many people as we used to be able to. Um, but I think it's a trend of having the CFO really be the hub for data and analysis and kind of getting that disparate operations functions and RevOps would show up to their meeting and be like, this is what I'm seeing for pipeline and conversion and sales metrics. And then I would say, well, this is what I'm seeing for close rate and retention rate and all of that. That really is like one and the same. And so rather than having your HR department show up with stuff and your RevOps team show up with stuff and then trying to reconcile all of that, if you put that under common ownership to say, our quantitative understanding of the business needs to live with the CFO,
Right.
actually going to start to give you a really great basis to be rolling more under the CFO. For HR, there's a natural tendency to blend those because people tend to be our biggest cost center, especially for SaaS.
Mm.
Uh, and so, what are we doing for salary, benefits? A lot of times our bonus plans and our bonus pools are tied to performance of the company. Commission structure is tied to performance of the company.
Mm,
Equity compensation is tied to performance of the company. And what is your equity comp package worth is going to be based on the valuation of the company, which could be tied to revenue and all sorts of things, profitability, path to profitability, running payroll, all of that stuff. So the synergy between CFO and HR makes a lot of sense. So I think it's wise for CFOs to embrace that.
mm,
It's also wise for CEOs and strategic leadership teams to know when their CFO doesn't have people skills, because
right.
that
Which
aspect of
happens, yeah.
yeah, and that aspect of it is very different. All of the financial aspects of HR I just rattled off certainly blend very well with the desk of the CFO, but performance issues, career path development, recruiting, culture, some CFOs don't have the aptitude for that.
Yeah.
And so as we kind of say, here, take HR to the CFO, it's important for people to be mindful that HR as it was doesn't necessarily need to move. Maybe actually those go a couple different places, with the finance really taking on that quantitative side. And then maybe the COO takes on the culture or performance or career pathing or whatever it may be. Really aligning the work that we do to the skill sets that our leadership team brings and less so to their titles. That's just a little bit more old school way of doing things, right?
Mm,
Um, and then the second part of your question was kind of like, what did the books not teach you to be CFO? And it's exactly in line with that, where our jobs are just getting bigger, and now we are strategic leaders in the company. I always laugh because you hear in songs like, oh, like CPAs are boring, like they always kind of make fun of the accountants, or like, Karen from accounting is like giving me a hard time. And it's so I giggle, but like gone, like that's not really how it works anymore, at least not for startups and not for a really strategic finance player, which is what a startup or high growth company really needs.
mm,
We've got to get our heads out of the details of it. Or they can't only be there. We have to think strategically. So I remember when I first like decided to go to school for accounting, like 20 years ago, was I liked it because there was a right answer and a wrong answer. It
right.
balances or it doesn't. There's no variance or there is a variance, and you can
Hmm.
always solve it and figure out how to make it right. As you get to your CFO path and any strategic leadership position, you learn that there isn't a right answer. There's actually several versions of right answers, and all of them are mixed with a little bit of the wrong answer too.
Of
Like I was
course.
saying, if you have an A/B decision, quantitatively, A might be the obvious choice, but the business actually makes the decision for B because of all these other reasons. And sometimes that's okay. And especially for startups where the end outcome could be so many different things,
Mm,
we kind of have to get comfortable in the gray area, that is startups and is strategic finance. And that's something the books can't teach you. The books actually teach you the opposite of that. So you've got to kind of have your street smarts to say, you don't have to solve to a zero variance. You've just got to solve to something that works, overall and gets to that strategic goal we talked about,
mm.
first set, for the business.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit well, not doing everything by the book. You have to kind of learn as you go along as well, and try and obviously adapt. Just at the start of your answer, of course, you mentioned how a lot of CFOs, I guess, the last 5 years can kind of go into work and just do their job, put their head down, work out the numbers. With the inclusion of the HR role, I think you mentioned a really important point, is that a lot of what is HR is being socially presentable, going into meetings, being there for people. Not everyone holds that kind of skill set. So do you feel that it's advantageous for careers in self-development to include that HR role? And then you personally, do you kind of split the day between, right, between these hours I'm doing finance, between these hours I'm doing HR? Is it kind of blended so much into your workday now that it's kind of all in one?
Yeah, for me, and I think that my answer will be a little bit swayed by the fact that I'm in early stage, and I always have been in early stage where
Of
we
course.
inevitably wear many hats. Um, but I couldn't tell you one thing from the other. Am I working on compliance, legal, HR, finance? Am I working on strategy, go to market? It really kind of all gets in the blender, but what I'm focused on and what I work on with my leadership team is really how can we drive the business with each of our skill sets? So my skill set really lends itself to quantitative analysis, data, KPIs, a little bit of math, heavy on Excel, all of those things. So I'm like, well, what are the
Mm.
numbers telling us? What can we gain from this? And so for all of the aspects of the business that I'm working on, I'm bringing my skill set to that, which varies throughout the day. And I'm looking for the rest of my team to bring their skill set regardless of title, right? So this my
Right.
CEO is inherently going to be more strategic and vision oriented and trying to be looking for the next play and very future looking. My CMO is going to inevitably be more creative, come at it from a perspective of a bigger picture and almost like an artistry,
Yeah.
of how all the moving parts are working. My CTO is going to be very technical and come at it with that engineering mind. So
Hmm.
for all of the things that we tackle throughout the day for early stage startup and at the leadership level, I think especially it gets very blended and we're really all more focused on what are the skill sets we can bring to move this company forward, rather than what do I do as CFO title.
Mm. Right. 100%. So obviously with your staff, of course, you include them to let them do their own specific jobs, without having that particular title, of course, basically.
Yeah, and then as on each team, it gets more defined, right? So my marketing team knows that these are the things they're working on for marketing, and so they tackle things with their own skill set, but their world is a little bit more narrowed, same as with the accounting team, the investments team, what have you. But certainly at the leadership level, I think delineating your particular job and tasks, or scheduling a time, or saying now I am working on this or that, that will actually be a detriment to just having that overall strategic picture. So the
Mm.
leadership, you really want to be functioning as kind of a unit.
Got you. 100%. Would you be able to share one internet resource or a bit of software that you're using day to day to kind of increase your productivity, or just something that you just enjoy using, like, in your day
Yeah,
to
I
day at the
mean,
moment?
I'm an Excel addict. I
Right.
love Excel. I always have. I plan most of my life in Excel. It's very nerdy, like vacations have spreadsheets. So I really enjoy that. That's kind of an obvious answer. I use QuickBooks a lot. QuickBooks can actually scale quite far for a
Okay.
startup and get a company really far along the way. I am in the market for a great financial forecasting tool. I've tried many, I've loved none.
Right.
But I'm still looking for a great tool that I can use. I don't think I'll ever give up on Excel, but that's what I really have kind of in my mind. Like, okay, I got to find a forecasting tool that I really love. And then the one that surprises me right now is ChatGPT.
Okay. Right.
Didn't think I would use it. I'm a numbers person, but dang if that platform doesn't help me out. I mean, it's just kind of ask it a question or like, hey, here's what I'm thinking, and it spits something out. And I'm like, okay, that's a great place to start. So I never
Mm,
trust it fully. It's a trust but verify, and I never take it, and copy paste it into anything, but
of
it's a
course.
great brainstorming tool I found as I am curious in developing my own thoughts and ideas. Brainstorming with ChatGPT helps me organize some of my thoughts, and I found it very helpful.
Yeah, it's almost like having your own partner, right? You don't have to wait for the definitive answer, but it just gets your thought process going, give you some ideas back, that kind of thing. Um, I think, yeah, I don't think I've ever come across a CFO that doesn't love Excel inside and out. It's
Yeah.
part and parcel of your whole day, whole life, really. Um, what's the best piece of business advice, Janelle, that you've ever received that you can share with us?
I've received so much, which I'm so lucky to have, and why I think I've been able to have the career that I have because I've worked with so many people that are so smart and have taken time to help me on my path. But the one that I'll pick for today is someone who told me to pick my battles and keep an eye on the war, if you will.
Good one.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I have a tendency in my, love of Excel and puzzles to be focused on details and to be very tactical and be like, if I can execute 1,000 things today, that must mean I'm heading in the right direction.
Mm,
It's not always true, right? Not every battle needs to be fought. There are some where you're like, yep, that's not how I wanted that to be, but I can't choose to fight them all. So picking the ones that are really important, and letting things go is really critical. But then lifting my head out of the details every now and then to keep an eye on the fact that a million tactical things won't get you towards your goal. They have to be aligned with your goal.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that bigger picture. Is really important. I find it more difficult to do. I've had to like train myself to set aside time to think strategically, and get out of the weeds a bit. So that's been really helpful advice. Not the easiest advice for me to employ, but sometimes
Mm.
that's the best stuff is what you really have to work on to
Yeah.
use.
Well, 100%. Yeah. And just lastly, what kind of advice can you give for future CFOs for this year?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this year especially, we don't know what's coming. If the past few years have taught us anything, we really, you can't plan too far ahead. So a lot of my philosophy recently has been do the next right thing. And in order to know what the next right thing is, you have to have some kind of vision for the future and understanding of the present,
Mm.
um, to kind of align where are we going and what should we do next and what are the things we're going to be taking on. And then I think just knowing that there's a lot of gray area, there's a lot of uncertainties coming our way. We already have uncertainties, and then we can be certain that more things are curveballs are going to get thrown our way. So learning how to thrive in a really dynamic and somewhat unpredictable, um, space is really going to be helpful for future CFOs because no one can actually see around the corner. But it's a great CFO skill set to be able to take data, patterns, trends, and analysis and use that to help see around the corner a bit and then be
Mm.
really dynamic and able to pivot and kind of take things as they come and work them into the plan, work them into informed decisions. So learning how to thrive, in an ever-changing market and get comfortable in that gray area, I think will be a huge skill set for up and coming CFOs.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, lastly, thank you so much for taking the time out to give your answers. Like I've learned so much in the last half hour of speaking to you. I've got no doubt the viewers will be taking notes every second of this whole video. So yeah, thank you so much for the time for joining. If people want to reach out to you, maybe they've really enjoyed some of the things you've said. Maybe they can ask for a bit of your advice. What's the best way to contact you, Janelle?
I am on LinkedIn most often. I am on Twitter. I'm not as good as that, or X even. I'm not even going to call it by the right name. But yeah, I would encourage folks to connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to post pretty frequently there, some of these same ideas as I'm working through things for myself or for clients and just kind of have these thoughts to share. I like to post them in real time. So that's a great place to find me. And I would love to reach your audience a little bit more and have some follow-up conversations. So I certainly welcome it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much.